Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto manga chapter review. This one is going to be for Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 2, which is called Tree. So, overall, I think it's probably fair to say about this chapter is that it's not really up to much. I don't think this is a particularly exciting chapter. Pacing problems, I know some people don't like to talk about them, but like, yikes, it is all over this chapter. The fact that just 40 pages, and that's all you can do in the second chapter back from time skip. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry if you want me to be like extremely positive about this chapter, but I just got so little from this chapter. And straight away, I think the series is like immediately right back down to earth, and like the hype of like the return of Boruto is just like, oh yeah, it's the same pacing, it's the same people writing it, like, yeah, why did we expect anything to change? Like, again, the actual things that are kind of happening and being teased that we'll get information on in the future are interesting. It's not that everything possible with the series is being executed badly, but we waited a month for this chapter and I didn't feel like we got a month's worth of content. That's my kind of core point in all of this, where Boruto is back. He says something is weird about the Ten Tails, which we'll get into. It's probably the most interesting part of the chapter, but they don't say enough to, I think, really prompt too much speculation. Otherwise, it's just a lot of characters showing off skills that we already know that they have. So a lot of the what I've called out before in previous chapters, a lot of what I call like basically filler fighting, where it's nothing significant going on, but it certainly fills in some page time. So to me, this was a bit of a miss of a chapter, unfortunately, but hopefully it improves going forward. So let's go through this one kind of page by page and see what we can kind of pull out of it. So we obviously have the hype thing from the last chapter was that it's Code and Boruto confront each other in front of Sarada. So he's like, I didn't expect you to show yourself so readily. I regret not coming here sooner. Boruto, this is the thing that he says kind of throughout the whole chapter, basically, even though it's really just the start and end scene, highlighting, I think, the flawed construction of this chapter. That you bookmark this chapter with Boruto talking about Ten Tails, with a little Ten Tails hint in the middle, but you don't say anything across a monthly chapter. It's really confusing to me. He says, withdraw your monsters, all of them. Do it now while you're still able to control them, and I'll let you live. Then Code counters with, did you forget how helpless you were against me 2 years ago? You've got some nerve to tell me that you're going to spare my life. So that's 2 years ago. Again, it's a 3-year time skip. So this is the event that was alluded to in the previous chapter that takes place 1 year into the time skip, where these two actually did encounter each other. And it's obviously where Code lost his eye, which is kind of alluded to here. You obviously heard me, so shut up and do it, or else you'll lose more than your left eye this time. So Code says that Boruto was helpless against him. So did Boruto take his eye, or was this like Sasuke? Because again, we are not bringing up Sasuke yet in this chapter, and that's still a bit of a kind of open plot thread that they're not really getting into here. But anyway, so they're teasing this event, and honestly, this event in the past seems a lot more interesting than kind of what we got in this chapter, honestly. I thought I'd heard the worst of your bluffs. What can I do but laugh? Then we get this sort of Sarada Boruto scene, which probably to be expected, is Sarada would like to talk right now, but Boruto just wants to deal with the kind of threat and get down to business. He points out that, Sarada, there are still a lot of people who haven't gotten away. Could you help them? I'll handle Code. Are you sure? Yes, we'll talk later. Just stay alive. And I suppose Sarada's a little bit taken aback by just how serious Boruto is in this moment, but she does go ahead with this. And then here we kind of get into the quote unquote, I'd say, filler kind of fighting that I kind of talked about here, where this is obviously meant to be some sort of a demonstration of it's Team 10 in action. Look at them being the ones to defend the village as like kind of first responders, basically. And it's just Shikadai kind of paralyzes 3 of the claw grimes in place, and then Chocho comes in and literally just does expansion arm jutsu and punches them and then kicks them, while Inojin and Himawari are up on the bird. And so yeah, we do get the gimmick of the claw grimes is that they can pop out of each other because they have claw marks on them. So that's what we get. Kind of Chocho nearly gets taken out, but this is where Inojin swoops down with the bird and actually takes one of them away. He just says, don't let your guard down. But the claw grimes takes out one of the wings. Himawari falls off. This is where Kawaki actually arrives in. He actually doesn't dive in to save Himawari. It is still Inojin who grabs Himawari. It's Kawaki who kicks the claw grime away. So he sends that one flying. It skids to a stop, opens its eye, and it has a Rinnegan. So they don't really do anything with it just yet. They don't explain really exactly what's going on with it. But it does have a Rinnegan, and they note that this one seems kind of leveled up compared to the other claw grimes. So yeah, at this point, one of them pops up from the kind of body basically behind Kawaki, punches him into the ground. Everyone is shocked. But the big thing that kind of is highlighted here is that the claw grime speaks and says Otsutsuki. So highlighting that this fragment of a Ten Tails is targeting an Otsutsuki, which makes sense because that is the whole idea of a Ten Tails, which is these are fragments of, that they do want to consume an Otsutsuki to form a divine tree and eventually a chakra fruit. That's part of the whole mechanic. So yeah, Shikadai uses shadow kind of possession on this, but Kawaki just activates his karma and just kind of blasts this thing. It does seem to just... It's unclear how much damage he does. I'm assuming he has quote-unquote killed it, but the idea is that there's multiple other claw grimes around. They keep kind of multiplying basically because more of them are arriving through the claw marks in the other ones. And Kawaki's just like, yeah, we're going to just, take them all out. That's basically what's going to happen here. And we're halfway through the chapter already. And that's all we've done here because there's been so much kind of action, but not super important action necessarily. Where you would say the most significant stuff in all of this is literally just the claw grime with the Rinnegan saying Otsutsuki. And then probably the line, I kind of skipped over it a little bit, but Himawari calls out to Kawaki and says, "Big bro," but he says, "How many times do I have to tell you to not call me that?" So Kawaki not overly trying to kind of keep up the kind of illusion of like where he is in certain people's minds. He was treating Mitsuki the same way, basically. Don't try and have the same relationship with me as you have with Boruto, basically. Well, we cut back to Boruto and Code at this point, and this is just Boruto's chance to show off using the sword. So the claw grimes around him, charge. He just gets to show off how good he is with the sword now. He does the classic thing where like you don't really see him do a lot with the sword, but he's constantly taking it in and out, and stuff is happening, highlighting his speed. Eventually he does, you were actually showing him slashing through things, but still it's the idea of the speed at which he's doing it with, and he just chops up all of these claw grimes. And this does actually impress Codes, so highlighting that in the last 2 years Boruto has really evolved to the point where he may actually be a threat. So the threat that Boruto is laying in front of Code, "I'll kill you unless you do what I tell you to," is actually true. Boruto says, if you insist on pressing on, you'll lose every single one of them. And he just says, besides, they're just tools anyway. Boruto then says, "You don't understand the true horror of Ten Tails." And Code's just like, "What? What do you mean by that?" Then we cut to a scene where actually the title of the chapter actually happens, and that is the whole tree thing. So this is what Sarada is up to. So she charges through the streets. She uses a fireball jutsu, charges through the streets even more, Chidori comes out and she's taking them out, and some of the other more experienced shinobi are like, wow, are you really just a genin? And she's just like, what does it matter, what my rank is. Then a Clawgrime attacks from behind, and this was a big thing in the spoilers when it came out, and I would say it is a little bit of a criticism. I think this is worth having some criticism of the idea of Sarada, a character who has the Sharingan, shouldn't be getting kind of snuck up on by an enemy just because she turns around to answer a question. Just because, like, I'm not going to say this highlights that, oh, she's really weak or anything like that, but this situation, you could have constructed it in a much better way that didn't involve this specific character being made to look even a little bit kind of silly for not seeing someone sneak up behind her. That's the kind of point here, is I'm not trying to make a kind of mountain out of a molehill here, but did you have to do this scene in that way and kind of have someone literally jump in front of this attack for Sarada and get bitten? Again, you could have done it in a way where just someone gets hit just before she can arrive, but just the fact that she nearly gets kind of hit herself is the kind of problem. So it's this guy, Soegi, or whatever his name is. So he gets basically bitten by one of these Clawgrimes, and then it just starts to basically grow a tree, like we've sort of seen before. The Clawgrimes, 10 tails type stuff. We know what it ultimately is meant to form, and it just sort of like turns into a tree, and this character is just trapped in the middle of that tree. And it grows by basically kind of, it seems like, sucking the life out of him. And then it does seem to also happen to another guy. Yes. So they're like, what's happening here? They point out that it is a tree. Now, this is obviously one of those interesting things where, like, okay, it's a fragment of a 10 tails, a thing that when it consumes an Otsutsuki will grow into a divine tree. So these things have this innate ability to also turn into a tree. Now, is this some sort of a wood style type thing, or is it just more of a what they are as a 10 tails? It is very unclear. And given that it's the whole like title thing, the whole title of the chapter is called Tree, this is meant to be your big kind of showcase thing. What are you getting at with this? It's just a bit unclear. Then we finally get into the final couple of pages here, and Code is just like, I know plenty about the 10 tails. Obviously, they devour Otsutsuki. Well, in truth, they're beasts that'll just instinctively bite anyone in their vicinity until they eventually run into an Otsutsuki. Boruto says that might normally be the case, but these ones are different, thanks to you enhancing them. It ain't too late yet. You need to scrap them while you still hold their reins, or else we'll end up in the worst possible future for everyone. And Code is like, what of it? When a 10 tails devours an Otsutsuki, it puts down roots and becomes a divine tree, leading to that planet's death. And my goal lies beyond that worst possible future. I'll say this one more time, Code. I'll let you live. In return, guide me to where the main body of 10 tails is. Give me a break. Have you lost your mind? I'll be honest with you. Killing you is easy. So instead of dying in vain, why not do one act of good for the world? Code just says, you'll be the one dying. And then Boruto realizes, okay, so I'm going to have to deal with you then. I guess there's no cure for idiocy. And it seems like he's just about to maybe create a Rasengan with his hand. But he continues to walk forward, and in a way, the spiral beginning to form of the Rasengan is more happening around Boruto's body than just in his hand. And Code's like, a Rasengan? What a one-trick pony. But then as he steps forward, he announces the name of this technique and says it's called Rasengan Uzuhiko, which they purposefully obviously didn't translate here for whatever reason. I saw some people say that, does this mean boy? So is it meant to be sort of like a Rasengan that kind of covers his body type thing, which could be interesting? What are we going for here? Either way, the whole idea of a Rasengan is some sort of a spiraling chakra physical chakra spiral type thing. So it seems that it's this thing that's kind of big in scale. Is it him kind of incorporating the idea of like his vanishing Rasengan? Because we don't really see much happening here. Just the idea that like almost like the dust is swirling around, and that's the only visuals of this. So the idea that he maybe has this almost like invisible Rasengan kind of like battle armor on or something like that seems kind of a cool concept. But again, they don't deliver anything here. So that's my main takeaway from this chapter, is just that it is a chapter that just refuses to give you anything as the reader. You've waited a month to kind of find out what's going on at the end of chapter 1, and they leave you waiting once again. And I'm excited to see what this attack is. I'm excited to see what the whole thing about the difference between these Otsutsuki, these Ten Tails and whatever Boruto and Code are kind of arguing about is. But what about this chapter? What about the identity of this chapter, and actually trying to deliver just something really strong individually within this chapter? Because a lot of it is kind of time consuming, like I said. It's like there's been so many chapters of Boruto in its first half that are kind of very much like this, where it's 40 pages, but it is not in any way packed full of content. And look how quick I got through it there, and I really don't have that much extra to talk about here. The only other thing that I really want to talk about is kind of the whole, what are they talking about with regards to these ones are different, but why and to what end? And what is Boruto hoping to accomplish with the Ten Tails? And why does he kind of get the idea that this is the worst possible future for everyone? So has he activated his powers or something like that? Can he see the future now? Like, what are we talking about here? So Boruto's obviously alluding to the idea that if Code keeps going with this, he will eventually lose control of his army of Clawgroms. And if that happens, that's the worst possible future, because suddenly you have all these fragments of Ten Tails capable of turning people into trees in some way. And I'm guessing this is just an idea of like, it seems like they're separate entities, but it probably is a kind of hive mind type thing ultimately. So them attacking anything and trying to turn them into trees, they'll eventually get right one time, activate the divine tree kind of type thing. But it seems like Boruto's worried about more than that. Like, Boruto's almost worried about more than the death of the planet with what's going on here. And I don't know what he really means by that, because Code is like, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want the planet to die. And you're talking about like that being this being maybe a worse possible future. What's going on here? So what's being referenced kind of here is the whole idea, because this is where we have to get into the whole Ten Tails thing. As far as we are aware, and the prior Boruto content told us this, there are multiple Ten Tails out there. This is a part of the process for Otsutsukis as an entire clan, is that the Ten Tails, they effectively considered them to be like seeds, effectively. Now, it prompts the question, and I think that might lead into what's going on here. Where do the Otsutsuki get Ten Tails from? Like, what at a core level is a Ten Tails? Outside of what we know it to be used for, like, what is it? It's obviously a type of being of sorts that can eat things, but it specifically wants to eat Otsutsukis, and then it will grow into this tree that eventually forms this fruit of power that effectively evolves whatever eats whoever eats that fruit in the end. It's this thing that is effectively a mass of chakra that can then, compress it into this kind of thing that then, if you eat it, builds you up to the next level, with the idea being that if you do that enough times, you will ascend to godhood. So what are Ten Tails? Like, what is their actual kind of goal or true importance within this? Is it just as a tool? I don't think so. I think they're highlighting the idea that They're going to create more of the significance on like what ten tails are. So obviously, based on what we know, the Otsutsukis are literally an alien species within the overall world of Naruto. The ten tails would have to also be another basically species of creature within the world. So the Otsutsukis obviously encountered or knew about ten tails from an early point to start their kind of evolution process to use them as this kind of tool. So that would suggest that, are they both from the same homeworld, whatever the Otsutsuki homeworld is, if that's even a thing, you know? But is there actually more than what's going on here? Because that's the thing. They're trying to highlight the whole point of the fact that someone got like bitten and then just got turned into a tree. That's what they when you get defeated by a Clawgrime, that's what will happen. You will be turned into one of these trees. It will kind of absorb energy from you and you'll be effectively quote unquote dead as it did in this kind of tree form. And okay, like let's say that happens. That's still effectively what's going to happen with the chakra fruit. Because like we saw that like with the whole infinite Tsukiyomi and stuff like that and all this sort of stuff. That the whole idea of the divine tree is that its roots will suck the life out of the planet and all of the beings on the planet. So what is different about what's going on here? I guess it's the idea that he's given a raw mass of power the ability to almost like teleport wherever it needs to. Is that the significance here? Is that you have made a grave error by basically giving one of the most helpful abilities to this thing that kind of just exists to destroy and devour stuff. So the fact that like you have an army somewhere else, but just one of them arrives on the scene here and suddenly all of them can come out. That's a major thing. And I'm guessing they're going to do some sort of a situation where it is kind of the overall will of the main body controlling these to a certain extent. And these are now, in a way, leveling up, quote unquote, from, I guess, absorbing power from people. And that's overall improving maybe the intelligence of the whole army. And it's going to get to a point where, you know, in a way, is this what the Otsutsuki are? Like, are we going to maybe see a Clawgrime come out at the end of this basically resembling an Otsutsuki? Or is there a clear distinction between the Otsutsukis and the Ten Tails, and that they kind of work together in this kind of power system to achieve like godhood in the end, but they are different? So is this the idea of this is what happens when you give the Ten Tails the power to kind of really truly do things on its own? I'm not really sure. I really am unclear on that. So, I think that speaks to the idea of just like, there should have, I think, been just a little bit more information in this chapter about what that's about. Because I'm now thinking about like my usual speculation video for the next chapter, and it's like, did I not just say it just there? Like, is there really going to be that much else to talk about after this? So I just think it's a chapter that is fine. Like, it's not like inherently bad. Like, this is ultimately sort of stuff that we were expecting to happen in all of this, but it just feels like one of the kind of weaker options where you deliver a chapter that just has the least amount of interesting stuff possible going on in it. And like I said, I'm never the fan of like basically fights that just are utterly not important. So we get a bunch of pages of that here just to kind of set up that like, oh yeah, here are some of the characters that are actually around. The scale of this still feels rather small here, where we still only have like a handful of characters out on the streets here fighting. Like, where are the rest of the kind of important characters here? You know, the likes of maybe like Sai, Sakura, Choji, you know, other characters like that. Like, why have they not kind of arrived on the scene if this is the long-awaited kind of invasion of the village? And it just speaks to the idea of like, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you didn't do that, you didn't do that. So what did you do? And then you look at the chapter and it's like, oh, that's all you did. And again, in the anime, when we get here, I think this will look better. Because I think they'll put some style onto, the showcase of these characters using their abilities here with the animation. Especially Boruto's sword fighting stuff, I think will be very good in the anime. But it didn't do much for me here in the manga. I don't think Ikemoto is the most amazing at demonstrating kind of like dynamic fighting. And I always do tend to wait for the anime to really showcase that stuff to me better overall. So yeah, the Boruto frames it as the true horror of Ten Tails. And the implication seems to be that beyond just the destruction of the planet by the growth of the divine tree. And that's a bit like, wait, what? What do you mean by that? That's kind of crazy. Again, earlier on in the chapter, they did mention that, like, okay, Code did in fact lose his eye during that incident 2 years ago. It seems like Boruto, a year into his training, was nowhere near where he is right now. Again, you still ask the question, where is Sasuke? And we're just waiting to see a lot of conversations happen here about a lot of things. And, they still, for instance, they haven't mentioned Amado during this whole time. That's still an open mystery. I just hope over the next 2 chapters, so the first volume of Two Blue Vortex, we can just really deliver something strong to start off the kind of second stage of the Boruto manga well. But I do have to say, 2 chapters in, I'm not blown away. I'm not negative in the sense of, like, I feel it's bad, but it certainly is not the evolution in a way of the series that maybe we would have expected. And I get it, it's still the early days, playing cards close to the chest here, but at a certain point you've just got to, like, tell us stuff. That's kind of my thoughts here. So yeah, that's basically the review. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this chapter. And otherwise, I'll attempt to do some sort of a discussion video, I guess, a little bit closer to the next chapter. Beyond that, we are just waiting for chapter 3 to actually reveal anything to us. But let me know what your thoughts were. But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.